communication. Now we need to start in the beginning, and I'll go back to Genesis. In the beginning, we see that God, out of His great love and compassion, He created Adam and Eve, and we see that they had a perfect relationship with God and with one another. And the reason why, part of the reason why, is because they communicated with God and one another. You know, it talks about how they would walk through the garden with God during the day, and they would talk with God. And everything was great. And I've told you, and I'll tell you again this morning, that if you want a great marriage relationship, you have to have a great relationship with God. This relationship has to be right before this relationship will be right. That's vital to every single marriage. The reason why marriages are falling apart is because somebody doesn't love God the way they should. So I'll tell you, marriage will always succeed. It will always be right when you love God first and foremost. So they had that communication with God. And we see also that communication was broken when they gave in to temptation. They started communicating with the wrong person, didn't they? The serpent came and deceived them, and then everything else happened that you know. That's why we're here today talking about this. Otherwise, we can still be in perfect relationship with God. Communication is vital to obtaining that oneness in your relationship with your spouse. And it's so important because it's the way that we express ourselves and allow the other person to realize our emotions, our desires, our hopes, our personalities, our likes, our dislikes. Communication is designed to bring you together on a deeper level. And as you uncover what lies inside of you, you share that. It brings you into deeper relationship. God gave us communication so that we can open up our lives to that other person and relate to each other on a much deeper, more intimate level. And the reason why some of your marriages aren't as deep as you want them to be is because you're not communicating on a deep level. You haven't really used communication to its fullest extent in your life and in your marriage. Now, I'll talk about in just a few moments the differences in communication, how men and women differ just a little bit when it comes to communication. That was a lot. But if communication breaks down, you have to understand this. If communication breaks down, your relationship will break down. You've got to be opening your life to that person that you love so much. By the way, I'll remind you again, the second most important relationship you will ever have is a relationship with your spouse. Relationship with God is number one, but the most important, most intimate, deep relationship you'll ever have is that relationship with your spouse. Again, what's the purpose of marriage? Oneness. Oneness. You're not supposed to be one with anybody else but your spouse. So that's the most important relationship you have. And in order for you to get to that deep level of love and fulfillment and relationship, you've got to communicate. Now, communication allows a few things to happen in our lives. Number one, you've got some blanks there, is share. Communication allows us to share. We share our lives with each other. We share what we're thinking with each other. We share what we like and what we don't like with each other. It's a way that we share with each other who we are and what we're about. Number two is to reveal. Communication allows us to reveal. It reveals ourselves, our hearts, for who we really are. In marriage, I find it works best when you're totally transparent with your spouse. And when you communicate the way you're supposed to communicate, you reveal everything that you are. And that could be good for some of you, and it could be bad for some of you. But that's what communication is for. To open you up and reveal what's really inside your heart, what's really inside your mind, what really makes you tick. And we think we have each other figured out when we're dating. We're so attracted to each other. We think we've got it all figured out. We communicate so well, just like Mr. Hawkins was saying in that video. And we think we got it all together, but then when you really get down to it and really start to open up in communication, it really reveals who you really are. And for some people, that's scary. But you know what? If you're madly in love with each other like you say you are, you'll take the good with the bad, and you'll deal with it all the same way, in love and in grace. Amen? But communication allows us to get to that deeper level. We share, we reveal, we also learn. We learn through communication. You know, I went to school for 16 years. That was not just through high school, that was college too. So 16 years, and how did I learn? I learned through communication. I had teachers that could communicate to me and make sense to me. And so in marriage, it's the same thing. We've got to communicate communicate to each other and make sense to each other so we can learn from each other. And did you know that sitting beside you, if you're sitting beside your spouse, is a very intelligent human being? I didn't think you'd amen that. You have somebody there who can teach you things about life and can teach you things, more importantly, about yourself. God will use your spouse to teach you when you communicate. And that's a good thing. And it shouldn't always be one-sided. Can I get an amen there? Amen. There shouldn't just be one teaching. You teach me, I teach you. As we communicate, we learn together what this is really about and who we really are and where we're really headed. And it just makes things great. It makes things deep, like I said before. The other thing that communication allows us, it allows us to connect. We've got to connect on a more intimate level, and that happens when we communicate. And if all you're doing is having shallow conversations, you're not going very deep in your relationship with your spouse. You should be able to talk about anything and everything. The next thing, communication allows us to grow. It allows us to grow with each other. And allows us to grow in our relationship with God. I'll talk about this more later, but listen, if you don't communicate well with God, you're not going to communicate well with your spouse. You have to have this right before this is right. Again, I'll go back to that numerous times today, but you've got to make sure that you're communicating well with God so that you can communicate with your spouse. As I communicate with God, I found that I grow in my relationship with Him. And it's no different in my relationship with my spouse. As I communicate with them, I grow deeper in that relationship with them. I should say with her. And them and her. So communication allows us those things. Now, if we're going to do this the right way, communication must be honest and open. Communication must be honest and open. If we're going to fulfill the purpose of oneness with our spouse, we have to have great communication with each other. And the reason that so many couples are in counseling and in need of counseling is because they can no longer communicate. That bond that they so desperately need to bring fulfillment is inoperable. We have to build our marriages in such a way that we can share everything with each other without causing conflict and without shutting down. We have to operate in grace when it comes to communication. If we're going to be open and honest with each other, because there really is no other way to communicate except openly and honestly. I know that there are people in the world who make a living at communicating dishonestly. They really are communicating. The true meaning of communication is open and honest, where I'm opening myself to you and you're opening yourself to me. We have to be open and honest with each other without it causing a huge fight or World War III. We have to be open and honest with each other, and let me just tell you, there are times and places to be open and honest with each other. You know, when you're at the restaurant sitting there to a nice dinner, that's maybe not the time to be totally open and honest with each other. You might want to do it behind closed doors. You know? It'll ruin the day, first of all. I find that we have a hard time being open and honest when our feelings have gotten hurt, or when they've done something that we just don't like, or, you know, they just annoy us to no end. Then, you know. It's true, though, isn't it? We have to be open and honest. Our relationship with our spouses should be built in such a way where we feel so much security and love and acceptance that we can talk about, we can open up about anything and everything that goes on in our hearts and our lives. The thing that the devil wants to do is what he's done from the beginning. He deceived Adam and Eve, and he's trying to deceive us. He's trying to break our communication with each other so we can have that deep bond with one another. And we've got to get back to talking about anything and everything, about our, not just our good times, but our bad times, about our issues, about our problems, about our temptations, about things that are working in our lives and aren't working in our lives. We've got to be open and honest and be able to share that with the one that we're becoming one with. But a lot of marriages don't do that. We avoid it because we don't like the conflict, or we avoid it because we've been shut down too many times when we're trying to bring things up. Our feelings have gotten hurt, and that's why I said in marriage and in communication, you have to operate in grace. Because none of us do it right 100% of the time. None of us communicate correctly 100% of the time. We've messed up. We've gotten angry. We've said things we shouldn't have. We've caused that conflict. We've developed those